Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're working on a mix, you're trying to place your mid-range elements, and then the minute you export a mix down and you listen back on a mobile device of some sort, you can immediately discern what needs to happen. You say, wow, those vocals are too loud, or this needs to come up, or this needs to come down. Why is this? Well, I think the first obvious thing is that it's a good idea to remove yourself from your environment, whether it's on headphones or monitors, and listen somewhere different on a different device. So that's just good practice in terms of a mixing workflow. Listen back on different devices. When it sounds good across everything, it's good. It can go out the door. But furthermore, as kind of like a technical point, there's something that actually happens, and I don't want to get too technical in this video, but it's called the Fletcher-Munson curve, and it has to do with how sensitive our ears are to the different frequencies at varying SPL levels, or sound pressure levels. Quick side note, if you're ever interested in finding an SPL meter, you can look up, regardless of what type of mobile device you're on, iPhone, Android, anything like that, look up a basic SPL meter. It's a good thing to have, and it's also a good idea to monitor what type of SPL levels you're using to listen to music, where it feels good, where it sounds good, and where you're mixing your music when you're working. Complete side note, I want to get back on track here. So if we take that into account, how can we turn this into something that we can use while we're mixing? All right, I've got a song in front of me here. The reason I've chosen this song, two reasons. First of all, this is something that I've done recently where I have applied this particular technique that I want to show you. But also, this is something where no matter where I hear the song played back, could be my phone, a different mobile device, a Bluetooth speaker, my car, somebody else's car, on a video on Instagram where somebody's playing it on their home, anywhere, that the vocals always seem to be placed right. And I'm pretty happy with where the levels are and also the effects are. I'm going to play a section of it before we get going. We'll have a listen to the chorus going into the verse. Okay, so this is a song called I Could Get Used to This by Analia. I co-wrote, produced, engineered, and mixed this. This is my loud version of the mix we're listening to, and this went out to Matthew Weiss at Weiss Advice for mastering. He did an amazing job. Super happy with how this record turned out. Okay, so how can we apply this technique? All right, well, it is very, very simple. First things first, we're going to bring up a Pro EQ. Now, we're going to just take what we were talking about in the beginning section, and we're going to apply this. It's very easy to do. And I think a lot of people might already be doing this, but they might not be doing the second part, which is what made all the difference for me. So first things first, what are the frequencies that we're using and what are the filter shapes? You know what? Let's keep it simple. Feel free to experiment, but let's start off at 20 dBs per octave. I'm going to put a low cut on here. And let's dial in. It could be somewhere anywhere from like 400 to 500 hertz. That could be a little higher, a little lower, depending on where you want to spotlight the mix or the production. On the top end, I'm going to do the same thing. It's going to be 24 dB. Let's pull this down. It could be anywhere from, I usually like to keep things around like 4 to 5K. So even if we stuck over here, that would be probably fine. Now, the thing to point out is obvious. We're filtering off all the high end. We're filtering off all the low end. This is obvious, but what's not immediately obvious is what happens when we toggle back and forth between these two. At least for me, it is a little bit jarring, and it almost sounds like a distorted telephone effect if I play this in and out. So I'm going to start off by bypassing this. Let's play at the same spot. Have a listen when I bring this in and out, just with this static EQ move. So what happens for me is the minute I spend a little bit too much time working in this particular filter on, I lose my objectivity, or when I go back to the full mix, it just sounds weird and it throws off my calibration. So I was trying to make this work, and I was trying to use this, and this is something that we see in other plugins as well. If you have different plugins, like I know the one from Plugin Alliance that allows you to reference other things. There's an area where you can filter out and reference just, for example, the mids or the highs or the lows, anything like that. And I always found that it just threw me off. It was too jagged. So I was working on my monitors and I popped on the main EQ move that I have over here. And it just, like I say, it just sounded a little bit too jarring for me, but I wanted to hear a specific element just for that moment. So I hit the dim switch and all of a sudden, everything just kind of smoothed out. And I really can't explain it any other way than saying that it is almost like that my ears compensating for being a little bit more heightened to that frequency range in general. When I lowered the level, they kind of like balanced each other out. And what I was able to find is that if I combined this particular EQ move, if I combined it with a gain reduction, that for me, it was very, very smooth. And also the biggest thing is that if I was working in this filtered section to place some background elements or maybe some saturation that I was adding to a vocal or a delay, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't overcooking things, if I hopped over to this EQ curve just momentarily and it had a gain compensation, that I could go back and forth between the main mix or the full frequency mix and the pinched version, and it wasn't an issue. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make a small gain adjustment and let's go back and forth. Let's just start at minus 8.64. So I'm going to first of all start with it bypassed and we're going to bring it in and out. There is going to be a level change here, but just try to pay careful attention to how your focus changes when the mid-range comes in, that you kind of like zone in and you kind of like laser in on it. I don't know if you're hearing what I'm hearing, but for me, I can go in and out between the filtered version and back to the full range version. The filtered version gives me the perspective, which is this tiny little spotlight on my mid-range content, but it doesn't sound jagged to me. It doesn't sound like I'm hearing it and then it's hard for me to go back to the full range mix, and then when I do go back to the full range mix, I'm losing my perspective. For me, there's something that happens when you reduce the gain. Now, I will say this, and then that's it. This is all I have to say, is that if I'm on speakers and I'm mixing at something like maybe like a 72 dB SPL level, that number, that figure is 15 dB. I'm dimming things a lot when I go to the filtered version of my mix. But guess what? It seems to sound okay. And it almost changes the focal point or the reference point. It almost, for a second, when you drop down to it, almost makes you think that you have a mobile device sitting there kind of far away. You can hear it. And the fact that it's lower, I think it kind of forces you to, for me, it's like a head tilt thing where I just, that's what my body language does the minute I start dialing in to listen to it. Now, for closed back, that's a different type of sound field. It's more congested, in terms of how you hear things, how it seals off all of the room ambience that I'm hearing. So that gain figure is different. That for me is somewhere around like -8 to -10. And then for open back, that's a completely different scenario altogether. When I listen to an open back headphone, it may not be the same. It may be a different figure. Now, I spend equal amounts of time between my closed backs and my open backs. When you see me doing a video, 99% of the time, I don't want any bleed to come in from my voiceover mic if I'm playing something loud. So you'll probably, most of the time you're seeing me use these, but I use these pairs evenly, my open backs and my closed backs. And I found that with this EQ trick, making that gain adjustment in addition to filtering, it's a great mid-range check for me. And I've been using it for the past 6 to 8 months, and I've been able to get almost like a flashlight, like somebody's shining a flashlight, but it is not jagged. It is not obtrusive. It is not overwhelming for me. and it's been really helpful. So even if you use one part of this video, I hope that you do. I hope that you find something useful. If you do try this technique out, the EQ, the filter move combined with the reduction in gain, let me know how it works for you. I hope that it does, and I hope that it can help. Anyways, that's it for me. I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.